So first of all, hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Fetter and I'm the Director of Communications for Our Soldiers Speak. I'm very happy to have so many of you joining us with OSS's webinar initiative, Israel Now. And there's a special welcome to our dear friend Brandon Leach, who's joining us as well. Just as a little background, Our Soldiers Speak is dedicated to convening briefings for select audiences at leading high schools, college campuses, graduate schools, and for members of the United States Congress. We focus on the key areas of law, diplomacy, high tech, international security, human rights, and media. We've dispatched uniformed, active specialist IDF officers to over 350 campuses, including every one of the Ivy Leagues and other top-tier colleges. Our high school curriculum is now studied by over 2,000 Jewish students, and there's much more to come. With the Israel Now webinar series, we're excited to be able to bring professional and in-depth analysis of Israel and the Middle East to you at your convenience. Just as a little background and to be aware of what's happening currently at Our Soldiers Speak, we're proud to say that we are currently in the middle of our spring briefings. Deputy Surgeon General Tarif Badr and Commander Dan Goldfuss recently addressed audiences at prestigious venues such as Princeton, NYU Law, Israel Bonds, Duke University Medical School, Veterans Affairs in DC, the Naval War College, Harvard and Yale Law Schools, and many, many more. They also convened for Our Soldiers Speak's regional conference, which happened earlier this month at the Paley Center for Media in New York City. We had an amazing turnout, and the event was really phenomenal. I want to say thank you to everyone who was able to make it and who made it possible. Just as a little heads up about what's coming up, this April we'll start with briefings by Brigadier General Shaul Gordon, Senior Legal Advisor of the Israeli National Police, and Brigadier General Tzvika Haimovich, Commander of the Israel Air Defense Forces. For more information, you can visit our website, oursoldierspeak.org, and to inquire for more details about their upcoming briefings, you can email us at oss@oursoldierspeak.org. Additionally, retired Major General Noam Tibon works as a policy advisor for Our Soldiers Speak, and he has recently written a white paper on how to defeat ISIS, which will be released in the very near future. We'll be posting its release on Facebook, as well as sending out an email update, so it's something to keep an eye out for. Major General Noam Tibon will also be coming to the US with Our Soldiers Speak in May. More information about his trip will be available soon. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker today and our presenter, Amir Tibon. Amir is a diplomatic correspondent for Walla News, the largest news website in Israel. He's responsible for covering the Prime Minister's office, Israel's foreign relations, and the peace process. His writing on these issues has appeared in publications such as Foreign Affairs, The New Yorker, Huffington Post, Tablet Magazine, and The New Republic. An article he co-authored in 2014 about the latest rounds of Israeli-Palestinian peace talks was nominated in the US for a National Magazine Award and also won the National Press Club Award for excellence in diplomatic reporting. Recently, he's had a series of articles published at Tablet Magazine about the Syrian refugee crisis. Just from a personal place, when I say that these articles are incredibly moving and deeply connectable, I definitely highly recommend everyone to take a look at them if you have the chance. I'm definitely going to include the links to them in the email that will follow this presentation. Amir will now speak for about 20 minutes on the current political issues Israel is facing. We're then going to have a question and answer period after the presentation, which will also last for about 20 minutes. We encourage you to submit questions and comments into the box on the sidebar throughout the presentation. You'll be able to we'll address all of them at the end. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can before ending today at 1:45, and we're going to try to be really aware of that and end specifically then. So that's enough of me. It's now my pleasure to introduce Amir Tibon, and I'll have Amir take it away from here.
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for joining the call, and it's a pleasure speaking to you. Like Michael said, I'll speak today about Israel's diplomatic challenges, and we'll try to tackle as many of them as we can during our short time, and also leave time for questions because that's always the more interesting part. I chose to talk about four main arenas today in our conversation that really highlight the reality of Israel's diplomatic challenges on really an average month. This month of March 2016 doesn't seem to be too special, extraordinary, and yet, as you will see during the presentation, this is the day-to-day reality for Israel on the diplomatic stage. So what are we having this month? What's on the menu, as one would say? We have President Rivlin flying to Moscow today for an important visit. He's meeting President there. It's actually happening as we are speaking. He is there. They had a meeting about an hour ago talking about the situation in Syria, the Russian involvement over there, what the Russians are planning as their next move, and there couldn't have been a better timing for this visit. On the other hand, we have a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu to the United States that was planned for a number of weeks, but then abruptly canceled. Word came out last week that he's not going to Washington for APEC this year. For me, as a reporter on his traveling press, it was pretty sad. But beyond the personal loss, I'll try to talk a bit about what it means, why he canceled, what can we learn from this cancellation about the state of the relationship with Obama. Then we found out that there have been some secret talks between Israel and the Palestinian Authority on a security officials level, trying to put an end to the current wave of violent attacks, trying to create a better situation in the West Bank. We'll talk about why that didn't work out. And last but not least, we have the French trying to push their own diplomatic initiative, trying to put the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks back on track. And this thing, while it doesn't seem to be gaining any momentum for now, could lead to serious consequences. We'll talk about that at the end. So we'll start by just going through these events, starting with Russia. This is a picture that I received about an hour ago of Rivlin, our president, and Putin, Russian president, talking to each other in Moscow today at the Kremlin. Very good meeting from what I'm hearing from the president's traveling press, from people who are with him over there in Moscow right now. And this meeting shows what's happening right now between Israel and Russia. Some background, first of all. This meeting was offered by the Kremlin to the Israelis on a very short notice. I would say less than a month ago. The Russians contacted President Rivlin's office and said that he's invited to come to Moscow. And actually, in order to go there and meet with Putin, Rivlin had to cancel a trip that was planned to Australia. His office was working on this visit to Australia for almost half a year. No Israeli president has visited Australia for the last decade, and neither has a prime minister, and it was supposed to be a very big deal. There's a big and supportive Jewish community in Australia that was really looking forward to his arrival. The government there is pretty close to Israel. We don't agree on everything. For example, Australia has embraced Iran following the Iran deal, and actually there has been a visit of the Iranian foreign minister to Canberra just this week. But still, it was important for Israel to strengthen its ties with Australia. And yet, when the invitation from the Kremlin landed on Rivlin's desk, there was really no dilemma. It took them a very short time to reach a decision that going to Moscow right now is more important than going to Canberra. And so they had to inform the Australians they're not coming. It was kind of insulting. There was a small crisis between the two countries. But in retrospect, I have to say that it seems like Rivlin made the smarter decision. Because when he was invited by the Russians, nobody knew that we're going to face the new situation we are facing right now in Syria, which, if you've been following the news, I don't know how much it made headlines through the political events in America, but we just had Putin about 48 hours ago putting out a major announcement that he's starting to withdraw Russian forces from Syria. And it turns out that the first world leader to meet him following this announcement is Israeli President Rivlin, which is, of course, very convenient for us. And it means, I suspect, that when Rivlin goes back to Israel tomorrow, some world leaders, maybe even important people in the United States, will make phone calls to him, try to understand what Putin told him, what is the Israeli point of view about this. So good timing for the visit, and I'm sure he will go to Australia eventually, and I hope I will be with him for that visit as well. Now, Putin right now is the most important player in the Middle East. You can see that anything he says about the situation in Syria causes everybody to stand up and take notes. And for Israel, this is crucial. We've been trying very hard to build a strong cooperation with the Russians, just to have some kind of coordination with them to avoid any kind of tactical mistakes. We'll talk about that in a moment. But really, I can tell you that for Rivlin, going to Moscow was very important, but it was just as important for Netanyahu, the prime minister, to have the president go over there. Rivlin and Netanyahu are not the best of friends, to say the least. They don't really like each other. Netanyahu tried very hard to stop Rivlin from becoming president. There was a whole political saga about it. And then for a long period, they didn't meet each other. When Rivlin was already president, they didn't want to have meetings between them. There was tension between their offices. But once Rivlin got the invitation to go to the Kremlin, I can tell you that everything worked very smooth. He informed Netanyahu's office. The Prime Minister's office immediately told him, look, with all due respect to Australia, it's more important for us that you'll go to Moscow right now because of how important Russia is in the Syrian arena, because of Russia's involvement also in everything that has to do with Iran and the fight against ISIS. And also on Friday, which was 4 days before Rivlin took off to Moscow, he met Netanyahu. They sat for an hour, just the two of them in four eyes, and the Prime Minister briefed him about the important things that he wants him to bring up during the conversation with Putin. So this really shows you the new reality we're seeing in the region, where Russia is the most important player, and for Israel, that calls for some adjustments. A bit about the Israeli-Russian cooperation we're seeing on the ground. Most of the communications are done on a military-to-military level. Basically, it's the Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF, General Yair Golan, who is responsible for a lot of these communications with his Russian counterpart. But there's also cooperation and coordination on a more tactical level, less senior officers. However, as good as that coordination is, and I can tell you it's working, you know, we were still caught by surprise when Putin declared that he's withdrawing his forces 2 days ago. It was a bit embarrassing for the Israeli intelligence community. We have, you know, the great IDF intelligence, which I once served in, and Mossad and all these other agencies working, and yet such a huge strategic event was completely missed by our intelligence services. And the IDF Chief of Staff, General Eisenkot, gave a briefing to the Knesset's Foreign Affairs Committee just yesterday, and he admitted, the members of the committee asked him, did we have any heads up about this? And he admitted we had no clue. We were completely in the dark. We were surprised by what Putin decided to do. We don't really understand why he did it. And that makes Rivlin's trip to Moscow actually much more important, because maybe now we'll get a first-hand explanation from the man who's calling the shots. Looking at the broader picture in Syria, for Israel, avoiding any confrontation with Russia is as important and as achieving any other goal in Syria. Israel is not involved in the Syrian civil war. Those of you who heard my good friend Yaakov Lapin from the Jerusalem Post doing this webinar last month probably got a very good explanation of what Israel is looking at in Syria. But our main objective is not to get drawn into the conflict, but at the same time to protect Israel from things that we find disturbing. For example, weapon shipments to Hezbollah in Lebanon, any kind of attempt by Assad or by Iran to harm Israeli interests. And then when those things happen, Israel acts, the Air Force or other methods are used. And yet, for Israel to avoid a confrontation with the Russian forces on the ground in Syria and also with the Russian Air Force is as important as achieving any other goal, for example, you know, stopping a weapon shipments or something like that. We saw what happened to Turkey when the Turkish Air Force shot down a Russian jet close to their border with Syria, and the implication has been very bad, and basically Russia and Turkey were on the verge of a military conflict. Israel doesn't want to get to that point, and that's why it's extremely important for the IDF and the government to have this close coordination with the Russians. We talked about how the IDF is conducting it, but there's also been some meetings between Netanyahu and Putin. They met twice in the last half year. Once Netanyahu went to visit Putin in Russia. Second time they met in Paris on the sidelines of the world. I think it was the global warming conference that was held in Paris right after the terror attacks. And actually Netanyahu and Putin have met and spoken on the phone with each other more frequently than Netanyahu and Obama in the last few months. They've been very closely talking to each other, phone calls, and also messengers going in between Israel and Russia, like Rivlin today. And so some people would say, wow, that's a big statistic to point out to, that Netanyahu and Putin are talking more than Netanyahu and Obama. But we should also add the very important information that Israel updates the United States about everything that goes on between Israel and Russia. We don't want to keep the Americans in the dark. That's what my sources in the government and in the IDF are all telling me. Actually, the update takes place very quickly. If there's a meeting, you know, if there's a meeting with the Russians, the Americans are informed immediately. So that's for the Russian part of our talk. We talked about Putin and Rivlin, so now let's talk about these two guys, Netanyahu and Obama. This picture says everything. We've had another kind of small drama between them this week. Netanyahu was supposed to go to Washington, D.C. The visit was supposed to take place next week, and it also was supposed to include an appearance before AIPAC. And there were discussions about a meeting with Obama before the president he's supposed to go there in a few days, and this historical visit, for an American president visits the islands in the 1920s, Netanyahu would meet him at the White House. But then last week, Netanyahu's office suddenly announced that he's not coming, and it caught the White House by surprise. They claimed they heard about it through the Israeli media, which wouldn't surprise me because I've been covering the Netanyahu-Obama affair. I've seen worse things happen. Two of them, and there were very low points of miscommunication, so I wouldn't be surprised if the White House learned that Netanyahu is not coming to Washington from the media. Now, there's the big question, why did Bibi cancel the visit? Why isn't he coming to Washington? And I'll offer you three explanations. The first one is the official explanation that I got from my sources in Netanyahu's office. On the record, they're saying the Prime Minister doesn't want to get dragged into the United States election cycle. If he came to Washington right now, everybody would stand in line to meet him, try to get a photo opportunity with him, whether it's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Ted Cruz, and maybe even John Kasich from the Republican side, and also people who are currently not running for president, but with the whole craziness of this election cycle, could become nominees in a few months. Everything is so uncertain on both sides of the political spectrum. And so Netanyahu said, I've learned my lesson from 2012 when there were all these accusations that he was involved in the election cycle, that he was maybe siding with the Republicans. And also after everything that happened last year, the really hard battle he had with the president over the Iran deal, he said, I don't want to get dragged into the story this year. It's better for me to stay in Israel for now, not come to DC, not have these meetings, and not have these headlines come out later. Why did this nominee get 30 minutes and the other nominee 45 minutes? And what did he say here and what did he say there? Maybe it's best for him and for Israel not to be involved right now. The semi-official explanation, in addition to this election issue, the discussions between Israel and the United States about the MOU, the Memorandum of Understandings regarding Israel's security in the United States finalized the United States is offering Israel close to $40 billion over a long period of time in military assistance of various kinds. But it comes with one demand that Israel doesn't like, which is that once the money comes from the administration, Israel can't go and ask for more support, for more money from Congress. And Netanyahu says, why should I give up the ability to work with Congress? This has been something that has been very advantageous for Israel over the years. Obviously, once Obama is out of office, it's not going to have to do anything with him anymore. But I suspect the next American president might like this idea as well, that all the cards are in the president's hand and Congress doesn't really have a way to bypass him or her with regards to Israel. So these talks are stuck, and that could be another reason why Netanyahu doesn't feel it's urgent for him to come to Washington right now. And the last reason, which is more internal Israeli politics, but in my personal opinion, it's actually the most important reason that Netanyahu isn't coming to Washington. There is a coalition crisis right now in Netanyahu's government because the government decided a few weeks ago to recognize officially the reform and conservative branches of Judaism for the first time, really, in some would say in Israel's official history. There have been maybe small examples, but the government basically decided that Reform and conservative Jews would have an area for prayer near the Western Wall. And the ultra-Orthodox parties, the Haredi parties, don't like this decision at all. They're trying to cancel it or at least to minimize it. And some people are saying that if Netanyahu came to Washington right now, he would meet with Jewish American leaders who would put pressure on him not to step back from what has been decided, not to surrender to the pressure from the ultra-Orthodox parties, and this could really threaten his government. If the ultra-Orthodox came to a conclusion that Netanyahu is going through with this idea and that he's being pressured by Jewish American leaders to discount the Haredi parties, this could bring his government down. So it's much more convenient right now to avoid being in Washington, meeting with all these important American Jewish leaders, and trying to solve the crisis at home before he goes to Washington and holds these meetings. So there isn't going to be a meeting with Obama anytime soon, but we did have a visit from Vice President Biden last week. It was very good, very friendly. Netanyahu and Biden are personal friends. It's very different from the relationship with Obama. They've known each other ever since the 1980s when Bibi was a young Israeli diplomat and Biden was a senator, and they really get along well. During their meeting, the most important thing for Biden was to urge Netanyahu to accept the MOU, the Memorandum of Understandings about the security aid. Biden basically told Netanyahu, look, maybe your calculation once was that it's better for you to wait for the next president, the next administration. You might get a better deal. You might have a president that doesn't care that Israel keeps going to Congress. But right now, everything is so uncertain in the American political system. We have Donald Trump rising on the Republican side, and we don't know exactly how things are going to roll out. Maybe it's smarter for you to close a deal with this administration and not wait for the next one. So, you know, you can argue that Netanyahu still hasn't made up his mind, and he basically told Biden, look, I want to sign with you guys. I'm not going to wait on purpose for the next administration, but I want to improve the terms of the deal. And if we're not going to Congress, then I want to get some kind of compensation for it in advance. One question people in Israel are asking is, was there some kind of American political motive for Biden's visit? Because Biden came here with his family, his wife, grandchildren. It was very much a family kind of trip. They did a lot of photo opportunities, you know, going to the old city in Jerusalem, having these field trips in Israel. It looked like they have a great time, a lot of fun. And some people in Israel are wondering, you know, maybe it wasn't just because of the MOU that he came here, but also because Biden could, under certain circumstances, find himself once again in the presidential nomination talk. Right now, Hillary Clinton is cruising, it seems, towards the Democratic nomination, but there's this whole thing with the emails and the FBI. And some people around Netanyahu are speculating that maybe Biden is basically being prepared on the shelf for a day when he might re-enter the presidential talk. And that's why he went to the Oscars 2 weeks ago, and that's why he came to this very genic to Israel. Netanyahu played the game very well. He was very warm towards the vice president. You could really see through the interaction that they like each other, and Netanyahu didn't try to hide it. And so if that was the purpose of sending Biden here to get some good photographs, I think that was achieved. Now to less pleasant photographs, which is what you're seeing now on the screen from another terror attack just in the last few days. The lone wolves intifada, the stab continuing at full force. We had 4 different terror attacks taking place during Biden's visit, and we've had at least 5 others since he left, which was just a week ago. There were talks between the IDF, generals in the IDF, and Palestinian security officials on improving the security coordination between the two sides and then turning the security coordination into a basis for some kind of a diplomatic breakthrough, but these talks ended in failure. The good thing you can say from this anecdote I'm sharing with you is that we see Israelis and Palestinians keep talking to each other. The IDF, you know, the central command of the IDF, which is responsible for the West Bank, the government coordinator for the territories, which is an officer by the rank of Major General, they keep talking to their Palestinian counterparts all the time, and we see that the security coordination keeps working. The Palestinian Authority, according to what I'm hearing from my sources in the government and in the IDF, is still working with Israel to thwart large terror plots. They are arresting Hamas operatives. They're stopping terrorists who want to carry out big attacks. The problem is that these lone wolf attacks cannot be detected most of the time through intelligence, and so neither the IDF nor the Palestinian security forces have really a way to stop them. The IDF chief of staff confessed about a month and a half ago that we've had, you know, more than 100 attacks of this kind in the last few months, and there wasn't pre-intelligence about even one of them. That's really unbelievable, because Israel has a very good intelligence system when it comes to stopping these larger attempts by Hamas and other terror groups to organize bombing attacks and maybe even suicide bombings. But when it comes to one person that gets up in the morning, or 2 people, friends from a village, who get up in the morning and take a knife and go out to stab people, it's impossible to collect intelligence. And there has been an attempt to maybe improve the atmosphere on the street to diffuse the tensions through these talks. It didn't work. Another nugget I can share with you, Netanyahu had a meeting a few weeks ago with a senior Arab official from some Arab country that talks to Israel. You know, the relationship between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors has quietly but consistently improved in the last years because of the way we view Iran and the way the Arabs view Iran, and also the common threat of terrorism, and also, I would say, common disappointment from the Obama administration, both on the Israeli side and the Arab side. And in the meeting with this senior Arab official, Netanyahu basically said, I really want to make progress with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority leader. I really want to get the diplomatic process back on track, but it's impossible. Abbas doesn't really want to move forward. He's entrenched in his home political positions. And you hear the same thing from the Palestinian side. Both sides are saying, we want to make progress, we want to move forward, but the other side, for political reasons, is stuck. And that's where we are. Nothing is really making any progress. And last but not least, we've reached the French part of our conversation. Here in the picture, you see Prime Minister Netanyahu and French President Hollande in better days. That was during Hollande's last visit to Israel. They're not so close friends today. The French are trying to push their own kind of diplomatic initiative. They're trying to convene an international conference during the summer that will deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And their idea is, if we get more actors involved in the peace process, it won't be just the Americans, the Israelis, and the Palestinians, but we'll get the Egyptians, the Jordanians, maybe even the Saudis, and some other Arab countries that officially don't have relationships with Israel, but quietly under the radar do work with the Israelis. Maybe if we create this kind of supportive environment, it will be better for pushing forward the peace process. Israel has replied to the French conference basically in a positive way, but there's a caveat, because the French have declared that if the conference fails at reaching some kind of breakthrough at moving forward the peace process, then France will unilaterally recognize Palestine as a state. That's something that no Western European country except for Sweden has done, and it will be a big precedent. It will make other European countries to follow through, and Israel really doesn't like that. And so the Israeli response to the French initiative has been, look, an international conference with the Arabs, sure, we're for it, let's do it. But this idea, if it fails, the Palestinians are immediately rewarded. We don't like that. We had a special envoy from the French side, a diplomat from the foreign ministry, visiting Jerusalem and Ramallah this week to hold meetings about this initiative. From what I've heard from all three sides, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the French, nothing really happened, but they continue working on it.
Amir,
the million-dollar question.
Yeah. So just sorry to interrupt. I know that we had a lot of questions coming in. I know this is the last slide, but just we're going to be switching over to questions in just 1 second.
All right. So the million-dollar question is, will this French initiative eventually lead us to the place you're seeing pictured right here? The UN Security Council will receive some kind of resolution with parameters for Israeli-Palestinian peace. Israel obviously doesn't like the idea. We don't want to have some kind of Security Council resolution that will bind us. And that's something that actually encourages Israel to cooperate with the French, because we say maybe if we work with them, we can stop this from reaching the Security Council.
All right. Amir, thank you very much. I know that it was a little bit of time with a lot of information. I also just wanted to mention we had some lapses in the connection at certain points. And so I know some people wrote in about that as well. We experienced it as well. We're working on figuring that out, but many apologies for the fact that the sort of glitchiness happened occasionally there. I do want to get into questions though. Again, if anybody has questions that they want to submit, you can do it on the side of the screen bar here in the comments section, or you can email them directly to me, which would be michael.oursoldiersspeak@gmail.com. So Amir, we're going to get started with questions. So different questions have come in different levels about what you've talked about, and some are very specific and some get a little more general about just the situation. One of the specific questions though was, how will the Russian departure from Syria impact that region there specifically? You talked about it from the Israel side, but is it good for Syria? Is it good for Israel that this is happening? You talked about the surprise aspect, and sort of like, how will that move forward in regards to Hezbollah, in regards to ISIS and things like that? I know this is a more general question.
So I'm not sure if I have all the information to answer it, if it's good, if it's bad, but I will say this. What I've heard so far from a few Israeli sources is that there is reason for worry, because up until now, the Russians were running the show, and we knew that they are constraining Hezbollah and Assad and Iran. All of these actors I've just mentioned are partners of Russia. Russia is supporting Iran and supporting Hezbollah and supporting the Assad regime in Syria. And once the Russians have a strong presence in Syria, we can count on them to tell these forces, don't mess with the Israelis, all right? You can do whatever you want, but don't mess with the Israelis. What happens now when the Russian presence is no longer that strong, but these forces that are very negative towards Israel have already benefited from the Russian effort? Iran seems better positioned in Syria right now. So does the Assad regime, so does Hezbollah. It's true, they all have their own things to worry about. Israel is probably not their largest concern. They need to fight the Syrian rebels, they need to fight ISIS, they have problems with Turkey, but we did count on the Russians being there as some kind of a constraining force. We don't know what will happen now when they're starting to leave.
Another question that follows right up on the heels of that is a question, somebody pointed out that Russia's role in the Middle East historically kind of comes in waves. It has a large presence there, and then it seems to not be there at all. Now it's here again. It is a key player in what's going on. Now it's pulling out again. Is there a place, just from your side and opinion, that Russia has now become once again a strong key player in the Middle East and will stay that way for some time in the processes that go on? Or has this just been a temporary sort of moment in history again?
So what most Israeli officials are thinking is that the Russians are here to stay for now. I don't know what will happen in a year, in 2 or 3. But right now, it seems that they're still big in the game. Even though they're taking some forces out of Syria, they're still the ones calling the shots. The Americans, it seems, have basically given up on Syria. They're letting the Russians run the show. If you look at what's happening in Geneva, the talks between the United States and Russia and some other world powers, and then the Syrian regime, Syrian opposition, Putin is most of the time getting his way. And that's why, as I said, for Israel, being in close coordination with the Russians is extremely important. It doesn't come on expense of the United States. The United States is still a much, much stronger ally of Israel on any aspect. And we do try to inform the Americans really on everything that's discussed with the Russians. But you can't ignore them anymore. And nobody knows how long this will go on. But from my conversations with neighboring countries, I think something that should worry the United States, but Israel just needs to adjust to it, which is people saying, look, maybe it's better to be aligned with Russia. Maybe for an Arab dictator, maybe the president of Egypt, the king of Jordan, whoever, it's better to be aligned or at least closer to the Russians, because look how they've supported Assad. Look what they've done. They've actually sacrificed blood for keeping him in power. And that goes a long way in the Middle East. So I don't think they're going to lose their influence anytime soon. Although there's a caveat to that, which is their terrible economic situation, with oil prices going down, with the sanctions that the West has put on them because of Ukraine. And there is also a limit to how much they can be dragged on both fronts.
That's great. Thank you. Some of the questions shifted also have moved towards general policy and some thoughts from things that you might hear. I know a question that just came in that seems appropriate is a question of, with the relations as they stand right now, Russia, Israel, US, and the things, it's still open channels, but things are shifting. Is Israel, does it seem that Israel wants to be pushing or is pushing the US government to speak out about Iran violating the nuclear deal? I know this is a little further from what we had discussed already. Do you know any thoughts on this, or have you heard things about it?
So look, I think Israel likes some of what it's hearing from Washington, but there's a disagreement. I'll explain. Once the Iranians did all the latest ballistic missile launchings, all these experiments they're running, the United States was pretty quick in condemning them. We heard Samantha Power, calling for a special Security Council meeting about this and condemning the Iranians. And the Israelis like that. Why do they like it? Because it shows that the U.S. is serious about violating all of the UN Security Council resolutions. But where's the problem? Israel is saying, look, this shows you how unserious and unreliable the Iranians are when it comes to the nuclear deal. What they're doing with past UN Security Council missiles, they're going to do the same thing when it comes to the nuclear deal. And that's where the United States is still saying, look, one doesn't mean the other, okay? They're violating all these decisions from the past. We're going to go after them. But we haven't caught any sign that they're violating the current deal. And what you're saying right now is that Iran is becoming more and more important in the international scene. As I said, Rivlin was supposed to go to Australia. He didn't go, but the Iranian foreign minister is in Australia.
We see.
Then the Germans, so it becomes more and more problematic to contain them.
All right, thank you. And I know, again, it's been a little glitchy. So again, I thank everybody for bearing with us for sort of the in and out that keeps happening here. Another question that came in was is about France and the process that you have spoken about with France now and what they're putting forward. It seems that historically, in recent history at least, the majority of peace initiatives seem to have been hosted or put forward by the United States, really pushed it from that direction. For France stepping up like this, it seems very unique and almost out of the blue. And there's a question of what made this sort of a front page issue for France right now? Is there, and the question continues, and I think it's interesting to me as well, is the question of, could this be attributed towards the rise of, BDS movements and sort of their work out of Europe and things that we're hearing of now, or is this separate from that too?
Why are the French doing this? Two main reasons. The first reason, France is very close to some Arab countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Emirates, very close to France. This is also the reason why France was much harsher on Iran than other Western powers. We know that during the nuclear negotiations with Iran, France took the hardest stand from all the 6 world powers. And Israel, of course, was happy about that. Netanyahu said that the French did a very good job, and he thanked them for insisting on some issues. And I've heard from Israeli government ministers that France helped us make the deal a bit more sufferable from the Israeli point of view. But this close relationship between France and the Arab countries that were against the Iran deal is also leading France to put an effort on the Palestinian issue. The French are looking at America. They see that the Obama administration is not interested right now in putting an effort into peace negotiations. And so the French are saying, okay, if the Americans are not going to do it, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it with our Arab allies. The Egyptians are very involved in this, so are the Saudis, so are the Jordanians. The second reason is internal French politics. They have an election coming up next year. There's a very big Muslim population in France that cares about the Palestinian issue. Also, on the French left, there are a lot of people who are devoted to this. And so it's good politics for the French president, who will be up for re-election, or for the French prime minister, who might replace him, to say, look, we're also doing this for the Palestinians. We're trying to reach peace. As for the BDS movement, I don't think the two things are connected. The French government has been very outspoken against BDS. It's one of the leading governments in Europe in speaking up against this. Actually, the town of Paris, their capital city, adopted an anti-BDS ago that Israel was very happy about. I wouldn't connect the two. This is really, I think, more a genuine attempt by them to show that they care about promoting the peace process. And they could even make an argument that it's counter to the BDS, that they're saying, look, this is the way to move forward, not boycotting Israel, but trying to push the diplomatic process, make it alive again.
That's great. Thank you. I want to ask one final question before we wrap up. We've actually gotten a few people writing in about this, and it's been brought up from two different sides. There's a question with the American elections, with all of the things going on in America right now, Trump, Clinton, and then Sanders, all these things that are happening. There's a question about perception of, and these are the two directions the question has come from. The populace in Israel, the general population there, what are their feelings and who are they rooting for? What are the feelings on the ground there? The other side is the question from the Israeli administration. Without naming names, in government circles, what are people thinking of, when they realize that Trump is the GOP frontrunner, when they realize that Hillary Clinton is starting to take the lead and start to sweep a little bit? Do you have any reactions to that at all?
I'll speak first of all about the general population. Actually, the website I write for, Walla News, it's the biggest news website in Hebrew, ran a poll during the weekend. We asked Israelis, 600 Israelis, who would you like to be the next US president? The candidate that got the most votes was Hillary Clinton. I think she got around 40% of people supporting her. and Donald Trump came in second. He got about 25%, and then all the other candidates got about 6, 5, 4%. I think the Clinton brand is still very strong in Israel. Bill Clinton was a very popular president here, beloved by the Israeli population. Every Israeli that that lived through the tragedy of Yitzhak Rabin's murder in 1995 remembers Bill Clinton coming to the funeral and saying in Hebrew, "Shalom Chaver," goodbye, my friend, and and it was really a touching moment. And the Clinton brand is still strong here, and I think that's why many Israelis like Hillary Clinton. As for Trump, Trump is very unpopular with Israelis who are either Arab Israelis, left-wing Israelis, and even more centrist Israelis. But he is very popular on the Israeli right wing and among religious populations in Israel. His strong rhetoric about Muslims and let's bomb ISIS. Let's ban Muslims from entering the United States. This kind of straight talk, no BS, that's very popular among the Israeli right wing. And that's where he's getting most of his support. And it's not just our poll that we conducted. You could see in a number of polls that were conducted here that Hillary and Trump are really the two most popular candidates. And then, the other ones are either not so well known, and Rubio, for example, was very well known in Israel. He got a lot of coverage as somebody who's very friendly to Israel and very close. But I think the kind of way that he talks and his appearance didn't create the same kind of excitement that for more right-wing Israelis Trump does. Now, from the government point of view, I think everybody is just trying to stay away from this, not get involved in this. Israel has been burned, one would say, from trying, or not trying, or at least, having this wrong impression, however you call it. And so right now the idea is let's stay away from this, let's not get involved, let's, see how the game plays out, and then, we'll have to deal with whatever happens. But I do think there's a consensus that whether it's Hillary Clinton, the president, or Trump or some other person, it will probably be a better working relationship between the prime minister and the next president than what we have right now between Netanyahu and Obama. So in that, from that point of view, one would say whatever happens, it could only get better.
That's great, actually. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I want to apologize to everyone right now. We actually had several more questions that came in as questions were going on, but we're really reaching the end right now. So I want to kind of pull this all together. Amir, thank you very much for joining us and being here with us. To everybody who was here, again, apologies for the glitchiness that's going on. We are taking care of that. We're going to look into that for next month's webinar. If you're interested in watching this again or sending it to a friend, we'll be posting this recording to our Facebook by the end of the day. We'll also send you the link in our follow-up email. Be sure to visit our website at oursoldierspeak.org for more information about our upcoming initiatives and briefings with Brigadier General Shaul Gordon, Brigadier General Tzvika Haimovich, and Retired Major General Noam Tibon. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Amir, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And we look forward to seeing all of you guys next month and to having Amir join us again in the near future. Everybody, thanks one more time.
Thank you.